Okay, we will go ahead and get started here. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for this webinar on war stories and inventory planning. Today, we're going to review the path that three distributors took to address inventory forecasting and planning challenges with a goal of reaching higher service levels, reduce overall inventory, and improve operations for their businesses. We'll cover the business challenges the business challenges each of them faced, the strategic approach they took to attack those challenges, and the results that they saw from attacking them. As we start the discussion, it's important to note that all three of these distributors faced some common enemies before adopting the Blue Ridge supply chain planning solution. They had trouble with forecast accuracy, and as a result, were either piling up excess inventory to maintain service levels, experiencing stockouts due to forecast inaccuracy, or in some cases, both extremes. They were doing a lot of heavy lifting to get the results they were getting, lots of spreadsheet work, manual efforts to identify and forecast seasonal items, model new items, build orders to meet restrictions or supplier minimums, and manage the flow of goods through their supply chain. And finally, they didn't have the analytics they needed and the visibility that they needed to properly manage and measure their performance as a business. So how did they win? They won by taking a strategy-driven approach with Blue Ridge. We'll show you how taking that approach drove real results, including freeing up cash to be invested elsewhere, significant inventory and overstock reductions, operational efficiency, and visibility into the health of the inventory and the business in general. So as we transition in, I'd like to make a couple of introductions today to some industry experts that will be joining me. First, I have Tony King, founder of Xerion Group. Tony and his team at Xerion have provided ERP integration services, development, training, and consulting to hundreds of customers in the distribution space. And also joining us today is Sven Anapu, senior business consultant at Blue Ridge. Sven has spent several years leading our Lifeline analyst team, helping Blue Ridge customers drive to better results with our planning solution. So they'll be contributing with me today. So on to the stories and how we helped establish some value for these customers. The company we look at in profile number one is a new customer, relatively new customer that achieved rapid results. They're based in the Mid-Atlantic, have a growing footprint from a location and supply chain perspective due to rapid organic growth. And like many distributors, they deal with a large seasonal assortment and a bunch of slow-moving intermittent items. So what enemies were they facing, right? They faced a lot of challenges, from forecast accuracy to an overwhelming number of interbranch transfers. Tony, can you give us some insight as to why this customer was struggling with the planning process using their legacy ERP and spreadsheet approach?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for joining us today. I hope you guys get some great value out of today's presentation. Super pumped to be helping Blue Ridge out here. For this customer, I see one of the major struggles in distribution right now is that we put so much time and emphasis on EOQ, right? And trying to find the right accuracy as noted here, but like just trying to find the way that we can best predict what's going to happen. And in distribution, I think one of the major pain points that we have is like, we just don't know what's going to happen in the future. So all we can go on is what's happened in the past. And one of the challenges that I've seen in the last decade or so is that most ERPs out there, we rely on just one method and one demand plan per se. And that becomes a problem because in our fast growing economy, like we have many different ways that we go about getting material and bringing it in. So like we may get material down the street, we may get it from a supplier across state lines or even across major borders. And getting all that material in is just not one size fits all. It's across many different avenues and many different ways. So like one of the things that I just see as a huge problem at this customer and many others is just the ability to be able to predict accurately what we need to bring in order to prep for the future.
Really good feedback, Tony. And we hear similar challenges from distributors that are trying to leverage the ERP and some legacy solutions to do the planning. So Sven, there are a bunch of weapons in the strategic arsenal from Blue Ridge that they could deploy to attack these business challenges. What did this customer leverage from the arsenal, and what were the results?
Well, Jeff, this company actually looked at a number of different things. Being new to the system and having, come from an ERP solution, there were kind of quite a few things that they didn't have to their available to them prior. One of the things was listed down towards the middle as demand exceptions. They were reviewing every single item in every location every night, and it really got to be quite laborious. The multi-echelon optimization was something that really helped them significantly. It allowed them actually to go ahead and look at inventory and demand across the network distribution chain as an organization, reducing like pools of safety stock. That was a big deal for them. And really specifically, it cut down significantly on the number of transfers that they were doing. That was a big benefit for them, and that was really through the multi-echelon. If I go ahead and take you in with each of these stories, I'm going to go ahead, Jeff, and point out to the audience what were some of the benefits that they actually achieved. The implementation for this organization was completed in November of 2019. So we're just about a year into full use of the system. They have seen a 48% reduction in inventory year to date, which is equivalent of about almost $28 million. Of that, $6 million was in overstock, and it was significant. And if you look at the graph, you can actually see that the business was actually quite seasonal. And so by being able to take advantage of some of the advanced seasonality, which was one of the key drivers, that multi-echelon, so getting the right inventory to the right place at the right time, and then the increased forecasting accuracy, all that led to a significant service level improvement of about 1.8 points above their goal. And that's in the first year. And what is that in terms of dollars? It's about $1.5 million in additional revenue. Another thing that they really wanted to go ahead and focus on, it was one of the goals that they had from implementation, was to really increase their turns. And I know that's the goal of every organization, but these guys wanted to do it right. And there's a couple of things I kind of want to point out. These two circled areas right here, what we're looking at in this circle right here was COVID, and it hit them really hard. And we can see where the demand actually was much lower than the inventory, than the forecast. So really what's going to be happening is we're going to be reading this as overstock. We've got to get the forecast in alignment. You can see it is starting to get into alignment. And then what do we hit? Well, this particular industry is being hit industry-wide with supplier constraints. The demand now is exceeding the availability of product. So these two things were negative impacts on the business. But even with that, we can see that, from when they first started, they have a turn of about 4.2. It's increased to 5.9. So into the year, we've got a 29%, year-to-date improvement. And really, what were the things that drove that? It was the ability to go ahead and really work with the system on reviewing the forecasts and the demand, making changes outside of the system if need be, but the system being able to go back and actually select the correct forecasting algorithms and apply them to the system so that it has exceptional forecast accuracy.
So you talked about the inventory reduction, better service levels, and they achieved their goal of increasing turns. Were there any other benefits, business gains that this customer saw?
Yeah, and this is kind of it's kind of funny because nobody ever really thinks about this, but one of the big changes in the organization that was a result of their the automation that was brought forward is the buyers now had a lot more time to get a lot of the things done that they never had time before. So same hours in the day, but they were getting more done, and they were leaving and going home, on time. One of the buyers that I was working with actually told me that his family likes to kid him because now when he sits down at the supper table, they ask, who is this guy that's joining us for dinner? So that buyer efficiency, that morale improvement was significant. Now you've got individuals that are seeing changes happen based off of their working with the system. And you know what? It's as much about the buyers as it is the system.
Yeah, so there's quality of life impact here, in addition to some of the business achievements that you mentioned. But let's maybe quantify it with this customer with some more numbers. A 48% reduction in inventory, which kind of right-sized them to their revenue. A 30 to 40% reduction in inter-branch transfers, which drives logistics savings. 29% increase in turns, driven in part by that lower inventory. And this, I think, ties to the point you just made, Sven, an 80% reduction in the number of hours that they spent in order review and approval. So what does that mean in terms of dollars, right? Those are some nice business stats, but they freed up $5 million in cash from reduced inventory, more than $500,000 in reduced carrying costs or carrying cost savings, 128 man hours saved weekly for the organization, and an ROI that they achieved in less than 10 months. So, it was interesting. You mentioned they onboarded and went live in November of 2019, and they've already seen the return on the investment with Blue Ridge. So story two, the second story is not only about rapid return, but it's also about maintaining that success over an extended period of time. So this is a mature customer. The distributor in this case is based in the Southeast, hard goods distributor again, large geographic footprint and nearly 1 million SKU locations to manage. Like the first story, they're also very heavily impacted by seasonal and long tail intermittent items. We mentioned that this customer and the customer in story one were having difficulty with seasonal and intermittent items. This customer had high overstock as a result. They also had a visibility problem and really lacked the analytics to measure and manage the business. Tony, does that sound familiar to you with the customers that you interact with in the marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, what I love about sitting here listening to you guys again is the ability that you can provide that level of detail. So one thing I've been talking about for the last many years is the inability for some of our legacy ERPs to report on some foundational layers of the functionality in the business. So like, for example, we can report on EOQ, we can report on what the targets are, but like there's no cohesive approach from where we start in the purchasing to actually the results. So like very much so now in purchasing and sales, in warehousing, like we're trying to drive toward final results. And I think some of the legacy ERPs that we have nowadays, they just are not focused in on driving toward those results. Like it was more of a blocking and tackling transactional kind of approach. And what I love about seeing here is the analytics, because in all of the legacy ERPs that we have today, in order to get those analytics, we've got to go get them. We've got to find a way to put together the breadcrumb, our way to the path to be able to make a decision. And being able to see some analytics to be able to produce that is just an amazing thing.
Thanks, Tony. I think it's a great point, right? That the breadcrumbs that you talked about. And Sven, back to the strategic arsenal. How did this customer attack the business problems, and what were the outcomes for them?
This organization is probably the group of buyers and planners are probably one of my favorites out there. I really enjoyed working with the the Lifeline consulting that we did. And this organization really was an example of having, the right people in the right seats. So we had good people there, but they didn't have the information available to them. So that last bottom bullet down there, the supply chain analytics, was huge. It was a big part of our meetings where we reviewed the forecasting accuracy, how they were doing as individuals, even looking at the forecasting accuracy along product lines and vendors. Being able to identify where they had the problems allowed them to go ahead and really, with a surgical knife, go after the problem rather than using that chainsaw approach. Other things, you know, the seasonality, and you're going to see an example of that, extremely seasonal. They even had seasonality on items that they couldn't really see it before. And with the analytics, they were actually able to go ahead and see some of that stuff. And I'll go ahead and show that to you in the later on in the benefits section. And I think, you know, one of the other pieces that I'd want to match or that I want to mention is the demand exceptions. This group probably did their exception work, meaning looking at the problems, not at all items, but just the problems better than anybody else that I've dealt with. They were always on top of it. They knew exactly what was happening with their business, why it was happening, and the exceptions really helped them to get a handle on that. If we look at some of the details with this organization, what I really wanted to kind of bring to everybody's attention wasn't so much that they achieved high service, which they did. You can see year after year being implemented in 2016. They have increased their service to goal each and every year. 2020 was a little bit different. Again, we've got COVID and we've got same industry. We've got some really severe supplier constraints going on. So verdict for 2020 is still out there at about 12% down for the year. But every other year we've had increases, you know, over 1.5 points. What this has done for them is actually allowed them to have product available to ship to the customer. So fill rates obviously went up. When the fill rates go up, the revenue goes up. And that's really the main thing that we wanted to go ahead and kind of stress here. Any company can come in and reduce inventory one shot, increase your service levels, you know, for one period. What we're looking to do at Blue Ridge and what we want our customers to do is obviously be able to do it on a consistent basis. And this is just an illustration of that. Talking about consistency, here we're looking at inventory levels. And the point here was using these tools, being able to go ahead and maintain really meaningful inventory levels that were really appropriate. It's the right inventory at the right place. Now you'll notice that in 2018, 2019, we had an increase in inventory. However, that was still a 1-to-1 ratio. Demand had increased. So obviously if your demand increases, your forecast is going to increase also, as it should. But also interestingly, this organization in 18 and 19 really took advantage of forward buys, investment purchases, where they were able to finally go ahead and really scientifically take advantage of those price increases so that they could increase their inner margins. What did that mean to them? Well, if we look at it, since they've implemented, they've had a 30% increase to the gross profit. That's certainly nothing to sneeze at. And this is something that, you know, they've been very proud of, and it's been able to go ahead and help further growth within the organization. Now, in terms of forecast accuracy, what I wanted to go ahead and do is just kind of show you what their seasonality looked like. And this is pretty obvious. This is almost that classic bell-shaped curve. And we can see that the demand is actually is actually the same for each of the periods. So that ebb and flow of demand is really consistent. Well, they were able to go ahead and take advantage of that. And by doing that, their forecast accuracy was unbelievable. In the beginning, you can see you're going to have, this is really the beginning of the implementation. We've got, you know, sub 80% forecast accuracy, which, you know, I think a lot of industries would actually consider good. It wasn't for these guys. We had some peaks. You're going to have peaks. You're going to have valleys. They're not going to go away. But what we were able to go ahead and do is overall really improve that, not just corporate, but, you know, buyer, vendor, item forecast accuracy. And here you can see where it's really, really consistent, and really it's within that 5% forecast error that we allow as a part of our lifeline services. So what that means is that the buyers are always 5% within what they need to be to match the demand. The ultimate result improve service, revenue, obviously. If you improve your service, you're going to increase your revenue. And then obviously having the right size inventory.
So you described how this customer's winning the battle against forecast accuracy and service levels. Were there other gains that they experienced as well?
Yeah, well, we got the service level improvement and the fact that, forecast accuracy went up, but by taking advantage of that advanced seasonality, the overall inventory actually was in better control, lower during the periods where we didn't have demand, and actually increased during the periods where we did have demand. So overall, there was actually ultimately an inventory reduction also. The same thing applied as with the first company. This organization took advantage of the multi-echelon capabilities of the system. They were able to go ahead and reduce the safety stock pools that existed. And then as a part of that inventory reduction, obviously the overstock, because now we have an understanding that the demand is actually not so erratic and up and down, but it's stable. And that also is a contributor to lower, more realistic, more accurate safety stock levels.
So let's quantify that again from a numbers perspective, right? Sven, you mentioned the inventory reduction and then the right size increase with their increase in demand. They saw a service level increase by nearly 10% from when their manual planning days ended. They maintained that service level integrity for 4 years running, and saw a dramatic 27% reduction in overstock. What does that mean from a financial perspective? In this case, it freed up $8 million in cash from inventory savings, more than $600,000 in carrying cost savings, 35 man hours saved weekly from an operational standpoint, and a return for this customer in less than 6 months, a return on their investment. So we've covered two stories. We covered a new customer that's seen pretty quick and rapid results. We covered a mature customer that has sustained solid results and improved on those over time. And our third story kind of takes that mature customer and looks at how ongoing research and development of the solution has impacted them a couple of years into their life. So, Tony, there's a laundry list of business pains here on this list for this customer that they were experiencing before they deployed Blue Ridge. How does this align with what you see in the market? Do you speak with other customers that have challenges like this? And this is a big list.
It is. A couple of the ones here that kind of stand out to me are the intermittent items and the forward buys. It seems like almost every client that I go to and talk about purchasing, and we kind of beat our head against the wall about how to solve this issue or that issue. So many of them are around the intermittent items, and then also the forward buys. And the forward buys themselves, like, they're an issue because we've got some money that we've got to spend from over the next few months or by the end of the calendar year, so on and so forth. And like, what happens is generally our systems are going to tell us to buy A's, B's, C's, and D's, but like, it's really not that great of a blend. It's just an overall, just an amount to try to hit a certain dollar amount. And like, it's not what's best for us to be able to actually plow through. And you can't also just dump a bunch of A's through it either. Like, it doesn't work that way. So like, having a good method for that would be awesome. And then another one is the intermittent items everybody has this issue, and this kind of goes back to the enemy number one, right? With the first client, is being able to have a better demand pattern or better predictability for these other items. And like, the intermittent items are huge because in some cases those are expensive items. Like, they're not all cheap, right? Some of them are very expensive, and we only buy them once or twice or maybe 3 times a year. And those items that we think we want to stock because we only sell them 3 times a year, like, those can be just a huge problem from the standpoint of like maybe a buy package issue, or it's going to be dead stock soon. So those two things are the things that really stick out to me in this enemy here.
Yeah, and Tony, it's interesting you mentioned the intermittent items. We'll come back to that topic here in just a second. It's because there was definitely an impact here. So Sven, back to that deep arsenal that this customer could deploy from the Blue Ridge solution to attack their problems. What did this customer experience, and how did they approach a
Well,
solution?
you're kind of seeing a repeated pattern here, where individuals, where organizations are able to take care of functionality, that they hadn't had before. Is the same functionality? Yeah, but everybody is now able to go ahead and take advantage of it. With the intermittent demand forecasting, the intelligent min-max, I mean, obviously a tool there to help them with their forecast. This organization was probably one of the best out there, in terms of forecast accuracy. These guys, they work the numbers. I mean, exceptions usually come out, on a Sunday, and these guys were completed with their exceptions Sunday night. I mean, they were just on top of it. But I think a couple of the things that really were very interesting, and I'm going to highlight here, was their focus on inventory categorization. Specifically, they look at classification of inventory, and they were really focusing on overstock and non-stock items, things that they didn't feel they had to have. So they really worked on that. Their forward buys, and these guys even kind of incorporated not just the normal forward buy capabilities that the system provides, but used analytics in terms of monitoring what the demand looked like in comparison to what their rebate goals were. And I'll show an example of that. And then, the last bullet here, the holiday calendars. This is an organization that buys overseas. And part of the problem is that we've got plant shutdowns. And they didn't have a way to go ahead and really appropriately, accurately address that. And it was something that they were able to do. And by taking advantage of those holiday calendars, they actually could ensure that they had product available on hand, ready for their customers, while their competitors were waiting for the warehouses or for the factories to open up. So I mentioned that they really focused on inventory categories. And, one of my favorite metrics to go ahead and follow is overstock. It's something that, I feel very passionate about. I think, if we don't need it, we shouldn't have it. And when I came in and was working with this organization, in the beginning, we didn't really talk about the overstock so much because we were in a process of really setting up the system, getting used to it, etc. But, about this time frame in here, which was about the October time frame, early October time frame, I sat down with the buyers, and the VP was in the room as well. And I made the statement, guys, we are sitting with almost $20 million of overstock. All right. We need to get that down. And my goal was to get it down to about a 15% of inventory, obviously with the goal of trying to even reduce that as we continued, using the system. The VP actually stepped up and said that in the executive management groups that was one of the categories that they wanted to hit. And he had a surprise for the buyers. They were challenged to go ahead and reduce their overstock by $10 million by the end of the year. So in a little bit more than 2 months, they were supposed to get rid of $10 million that they basically had been using the previous years building up. So that was going to be a momentous task. You can see that by the Lifeline meetings. We would meet actually on a weekly basis. We reviewed the overstocks by category, by vendor, even down into the items. We looked at forecasts. Did we have any situations where, the demand is completely dropped off of it? We've got a low forecast on it, but we still got the high inventory. Of course, it's going to show as overstock. So we needed to go ahead and revise that, and that's what we worked on. Also, very aggressively worked with their sales and marketing departments using reports that were within the analytics system to identify those items where really they were losing money on because the carrying cost was just eating away whatever margin they had. So they were actually able to go ahead and provide spiffs to the salespeople to move product, and then to go ahead and go into some aggressive price reductions to reduce it. In fact, by the end of the year, they did achieve their goal. They actually came in at 9.8 million, just barely, but they met it. And you know what? This achievement actually was met with applause in the halls of this organization. That was the story passed on to me by the VP, but a great story. That $9.9 million that were reduced, it actually wasn't just the acquisition costs associated with it. It was an additional $2.2 million in carrying cost. So that's money that they would have spent if they didn't do anything. Just to kind of show you what happened after this project, in the following year, in 2019, they had a pretty good handle on it. The overstocks, we still had some ebb and flows. I had mentioned earlier that this company was very aggressive in their forward buy, investment opportunity buys. They also were really, in many cases, they were doing some preemptive buys. So it was known overstock they were bringing in, but then they brought it back down. The point is here, if we look at it, very, very consistent, nowhere near the levels of 2018. Now, unfortunately, we go into 2020, and there's a couple of things here that I think the audience can appreciate. One of the things that makes this organization very unusual is that in relatively short fashion, they have actually embarked upon a heavy merger and acquisition tactic. They've brought in a number of different companies. They've added additional DCs. And so what we're looking at here from an overstock perspective is, number one, we had COVID, and that was one of the things but they actually reduced it. And then we have the opening of the DCs where we needed to go ahead and front load, basically bring in inventory that we weren't going to sell yet to make sure that it was staged and ready to go. By refocusing on this, and I do say here, took the eye off the ball, because there were so many other things that we were looking at that we weren't paying attention to the overstock like we should have been. We were kind of a little bit cocky. We didn't have a part of our meetings. As soon as we saw what was happening, it wasn't good enough that we knew why this happened. We needed to go ahead and reduce it. A new Lifeline consultant came in and replaced me as I moved on within the organization. And they were able to go ahead and reduce that overstock in the same time frame that we're looking at. And actually right now, they're actually sitting at levels lower than we brought them down in 2018. So a great story there. This is to kind of illustrate how a customer has taken advantage of the analytics outside of replenishment. The VP of purchasing came up to me and asked, was there a way that he could monitor what was happening with significant suppliers that they had, where they had a real opportunity for quite excessive, quite large rebates at the end of the year. The reason he wanted to do it is the previous year, they did go ahead, this is before they were really on the system, they went ahead and they placed additional buys in order to hit that rebate. Well, the carrying costs associated with bringing in all that extra inventory, because this is where the goal was, actually exceeded the rebate that they got back. So you wanted to keep an eye on it. And you can see right here, what we did is we built them a report that identified what the demand growth was like over the year. So we could see that 2 months out, before he had to have that final buy-in, he was at 85%. He could see that the upward trajectory that was consistent. He felt good enough about not having to place a forward buy. And by that, I mean bringing in an early buy. And in fact, they were able to go ahead, hit that rebate without placing additional early buys. And not only did they get the rebate, but the decision to not buy early for one item, for one supplier on one order, saved them an additional $20,000. And that doesn't seem like a big number, but when you take that and you multiply it across all of the suppliers where you have this opportunity, it's rather significant.
So Sven, you covered how they targeted specific results when they were attacking the overstock problem and achieved them, then how they used analytics to drive the maximization of some of the other investment properties. Any other anecdotes from an operational standpoint that they benefited from?
I'm going to go down to the second to the last one, because we kind of talked about, these others and other companies, and even with this organization. But by bringing on the system, what they were able to go ahead and do is really consolidate purchasing into a central purchasing location. They maintained their purchasing out of the location that they always had, and they were able to go ahead and take the buyers that they were using, with the other organizations and the other DCs, and actually reallocate those resources into other areas of the company. So the efficiencies of the system, the ability to go ahead and just review very quickly, buy very, very quickly, and really do it with, high forecasting accuracy and great benefits, allowed them to go ahead and bring everything into that central location.
So to stay consistent here, we'll put that into some numbers. They saw more than a 27% reduction in overall inventory, a fantastic 47% reduction in overstock, which they reinvested with, 2.5% increase in service level, and to your point there, Sven, that 64% reduction in man hours from a planning standpoint. Financially, what was the impact? Well, it freed up more than $12 million in cash from inventory reduction. That drove a $4 million savings in carrying costs. And again, we have a customer here that saw a return on their investment in less than 9 months. But what we mentioned on this particular story is that what makes this client unique is they'd achieved some great benefits, but earlier Tony mentioned intermittent demand forecasting, or he mentioned intermittent items and the challenge there. So this customer helped us pilot our unique and disruptive intermittent demand forecasting and intelligent min-max replenishment product enhancements in a recent release. And they saw some pretty dramatic impact from that additional functionality rollout. They saw 4.7% increase in forecast accuracy, 22% reduction in lost sales, and increases in both unit service level and percentage service level. Sven, any other feedback on this customer and what they saw from an improvement with IDF and Intelligent Min-Max?
This organization actually was able to go ahead and with their new locations that they were bringing in, taking advantage of that intermittent forecast, they were able to, that more accurate forecast allowed them actually to carry lower starting inventories. So all the product that they brought in, it's not a funny story, it's an interesting story. All the product that they brought in to go ahead and really front load for their new distribution centers that they were opening, as soon as they went ahead and they took advantage of the intermittent demand forecasting, they realized, you know what, we got a little bit more inventory than we needed. So fortunately, with the multi-echelon, we had the ability to go ahead and do some transfers where needed, and that helped to reduce the overall inventories. But it was kind of neat to see where that forecast accuracy that was really quite good to begin with was really improved with the additional algorithms that were brought into the system.
And probably drive some safety stock savings as well, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So as we've covered these three stories, and as we get ready to wrap up the discussion today, let's talk about what distribution customers should consider when they're looking for a partner for advanced demand planning and replenishment. From a solution perspective first, at minimum, these are table stakes. These are core capabilities that any solution you deploy should have. There's a much longer list, right, of criteria that should be considered. But these, again, are the bare minimum requirements you should have from any solution you deploy for forecasting, planning, and replenishment. But more importantly is maybe considering the right business partner for advanced demand planning. So when you think about the business partner that you're talking about the certainty of expertise in the distribution space, that they take care of and retain their customers, that they're recognized as an industry leader. They operate with the speed to onboard you quickly with a repeatable methodology, that you get to a return on investment faster by getting to production faster, that they're leveraging the power of the cloud and keeping you from deploying expensive infrastructure, that they're investing in the solution, right? That there's an R&D investment into advancing and progressing the solution. They wrap the right analytics around what's deployed, and that they give you the proper post-go live support, because we believe, at least at Blue Ridge, that once you go to production, that is just the beginning of the relationship, not the end of the relationship. So as we wrap up here and get to the end of the discussion today, we would love to hear from each of you about the challenges that you face in managing the forecasting and planning process, as well as the replenishment process. So please reach out, and we'd love to talk to you, assess the business, and give you an ROI on what we think we could help you achieve. Please also submit questions to the inbox here today at the webinar, and we'll be in touch very quickly to follow up and answer those for you. Tony, Sven, thank you for the insight today. And thank you everyone out there in the audience for attending this session today. Have a great afternoon or remainder of your morning, wherever you are.